we increase creativity in design by showing people how to think more abstractly about their design problem?
Thank you, Professor Martha. I spent this last year studying creativity in design and narrowed it down on the specific aspect, the importance of abstraction, which I normally feel is overlooked in the design process. More specifically, the question I look to address is, can we increase creativity in design by showing people how to think more abstractly about their design process? My slides are stuck.
You try unplugging it. Just unplug and plug it back in. Press escape. Okay.
Oh, yeah, it worked. So my talk will cover 5 topics: the motivation, what inspired me to look into this, the technique, the special technique we used for getting subjects to think more abstractly, which involves morphological charts, which I'm going to come up with a morphological concept generation, and then I'm going to explain the experimental design, the results, and the future work I'm planning to do. There is a puzzle about creativity. Sometimes when people look at examples, it helps them be more creative, and sometimes when they see example, it hurts them and they are less creative. Studies have defended both sides. One would think that studying should be helpful, but there are studies and literature proving that, or stating that people get fixated to what they see, and and hence they're not able to come up with their own novel designs. So the question is, why do some people think examples work better and some people think more examples actually hinder creativity? Maybe it is not about the number of examples. Maybe it's about how the examples are used. My project is an attempt to demonstrate that if examples are thought about abstractly, subjects will be more creative, which would resolve the puzzle about examples and creativity. Ward tested abstraction by running 2 conditions on a task where subjects had to invent and draw aliens. In the first condition, he told them to think about specific earth animals like a giraffe or snake or a dog. In the second condition, he told them to think about what a creature must do to survive, like distinguish between food that's edible and that's not edible. His finding was that more abstract tasks led to more novel aliens. In another experiment, it was found that experts can take advantage of multiple examples because they can classify the examples and look more deeply into this. What's in the case of novices, they get overwhelmed with the large amount of information present and they can't act on it. I'm going to now explain the idea behind the morphological charts. Suppose I'm going to design a new toaster. I look at the web and I find these examples. How should I proceed from here? A helpful way would be to take these apart mentally and analyze the function of each component. So I just don't look at the specific structure of the part, but what it is doing and how it is doing it. For instance, let's have a look at this part. What does it do? What's the function of this part? This is a toaster basket, which lets you hold two pieces of toast together. So by looking at the functional aspect of by looking at the functional aspect of an example, doing the same thing for the different examples, we can functionally decompose them and understand what's the function of each component. So here is what a morphological chart would look like. On the left side is, in the first column, is the name of each function. In the other columns on top are going to be the examples. And how it works is, if you see the row after the function, for each function, the row with the examples given on top are going to be means by which you accomplish that function. So for this toaster, in that cell, you're gonna explain how this toaster is gonna hold the toast in its place. We put the image of the first toaster in the appropriate cell to explain the function of it. So this kind of decomposition into functions and means by which those functions are achieved is what we are calling abstraction. Taking multiple examples, finding the principles common to each and the means in each example is abstracting over all the examples. This eventually allows us to understand what the basic components are and what different means are available, and thus develop a new design from a much broader position than if we were not abstracting. Here is an example of a morphological chart which one of our subjects drew. So one necessary function in this is to inform when the toast is ready. And you can see that the subject did this by drawing a popping mechanism for the toast, for the image of the toaster above, for that specific example. To test this, we chose the task of designing a novel soap dispenser. We chose this task specifically because Johnny Ives, the iconic designer at Apple, at a conference said that the world is in need of better soap dispensers. We divided our subjects into two groups. One learns to make a morphological chart and then uses those charts to help them design their soap dispenser. And the other group, the control group, examined the examples and then kept them for the design phase, using them any way they wanted to. Each design was rated for its novelty by 3 judges, assuming that the design met the primary function of the soap dispenser. All the subjects we had were required to be good at drawing, since they had to draw at some points during the experiment. We recruited 30 subjects, but eventually, due to changes in the experiment, ended up using 21, out of which 14 were male and 7 females. Here is the complete structure of the experiment. So all subjects began with using the Guilford test. The Guilford test is a pre-test to test them for their creativity. How it works is that you pick a common object, give yourself a time constraint like 2 minutes, and try to come up with as many alternate uses of a common household item as possible. Then we taught the abstract condition to think abstractly using a morphological chart, just as you saw before. They had 10 minutes to learn it by using a drag and drop teaching aid that we made. The subjects in the control condition did not see the M chart. Instead, they looked at the same examples of toasters and were asked some questions about their price, how much they were worth. After the training phase, both groups were shown 5 examples of interesting soap dispensers. The abstraction group had to make an M chart using examples, and the controls were asked to examine the examples, but without any specific instructions. And both groups in the study period had the same amount of time. After that, we gave both the groups the same design prompt to come up with an innovative soap dispenser, which is novel in a way that nothing like that exists right now. They both kept the images, and in case of the M chart, they kept their M chart and were given the same amount of time to draw. These are some of the designs that were rated novel by the judges we had of soap dispensers. We found our effect. The designs were more novel among the morphological chart subjects than the control, which was a significant effect with a p-value of less than 0.1. To determine the novelty value, we assigned each subject the mean rating of the 3 judges. We assume that this supports our hypothesis that abstraction enhances or facilitates creativity because the act of making a morphological chart involves abstraction, and we explicitly taught them the subjects to be able to abstract. Also, as you will see shortly, their designs were not simply a mix and match of the parts from other examples. So we did for the results of the Guilford test. We found that the average score of the Guilford test was there was no significant difference between the participants that were assigned to either groups, which basically suggests that our effect was not because of more creative subjects going to the M chart condition. So we found that our judges were not simply reliable. They were not similarly reliable to each other. However, an interesting thing that we found is that all 3 judges had the same patterns for the overall effect. So even though they did not agree on how novel the designs were, they did agree on the fact that the morphological charts was the group with the morphological charts came up with more novel designs. Also, another finding that we found was that the subjects were not just using the rows and columns to come up with the best alternative to design the soap dispenser. They were actually abstracting and thinking about it functionally, so sometimes their design was completely unrelated to any of the parts that exist in the soap dispenser that they abstracted. So by abstracting the function, they were able to solve the problem in a different way too. Also note in the morphological chart how abstract the functions are that are written down. Oh shit, I don't think you guys can read it from there. It basically reads how a soap is applied. And the way it's been described is directly from the directly from the dispenser to hand, directly from the dispenser through a brush, and through the practice of scrubbing. So to conclude, teaching subjects how to think more abstractly about the design problems and giving them a tool to do it, to scaffold that thinking, led to more novel designs. I would like to thank my committee, Professor Kirsch, Professor Clemmer, and Michael for helping me throughout. And I would want to thank Professor Dow, Professor Martha, Adam, and Claire for the support. Thank you so much.
Next question. How did you pick the toaster task? And did you think about other kinds of creativity tasks?
Would you
How did you pick the toaster task? Was that a one from before? Or was that something
Oh,
you made?
so the toaster task was, you mean the training? Let me
Or
go
just
back.
the use of the toaster, like rather than making them draw something else completely.
I was the main task of using toaster was, we didn't want to have them use the soap dispenser itself because we wanted to teach them the technique of doing it. So anything apart from a soap dispenser would do.
I see. So it's just something that people would know how to do, just a household appliance.
A household appliance. Yeah, basically a household appliance.
Do you think there's a difference between being creative when you're told to be creative, that is, design a new toaster, versus just simply design something?
Yeah.
Is the end product the same? Is the process the same?
There is actually there's actually very strong literature in this. People who think that they are going to be creative end up with more creative designs. So the practical application of this would be, when you actually have to design something creative, if you were told and you know you have to design something more creative, you are going to design something more creative. Does that make sense?
Well, but would the process be the same, do you think? How you come to the end product and how you...
That would be something.
Well, what happens when you gave them examples? Say you gave an instance earlier. When you give examples of something that already exists, what do people do?
Give them examples of something else.
Yeah. So what do they
They
do
were
when
abstract.
when they create something new?
So they were the only purpose of giving them examples was for them to be able to abstract the functions and to realize what was working and not working. So in the design that they come up with, they can incorporate the good things and the bad things in one aspect. So we were just testing this. Normally, since it's already been established that you're more novel or more creative when you're told to be creative, most of the work in creativity is with that condition.
I guess the question I had was, this morphological chart is
Yeah.
really interesting as an intermediate step.
Yeah.
Do people naturally come to it if you just simply say design or come up
No,
with...
no. This is one technique that we thought that could be used in the design process.
I noticed that 2/3 of the control group were male and 1/3 female.
Yeah.
Did you notice a gender effect? Or difference? No? Okay.
I did look into it. That would be interesting.
Yeah.
It was we recruited sauna participants, so it's completely random how we get it.
Okay.
I guess like on that day more males signed up. That's pretty much.
Okay, thank you.